last exam. Watch this. The spinal cord starts at the level of the foramen magnum. What bone was that in, the foramen magnum? What bone is this in the back? The occipital bone. So the spinal cord goes from the foramen magnum. Now watch this. It goes down to about here, the level of L1, L2. Even though the spinal canal, guys, watch this. Remember the spinal canal went all the way down through the sacrum, and then there was the sacral hiatus. You can take this out down if you want. Remember the sacral hiatus was the opening of the spinal canal at the bottom? So the spinal cord only goes this far, but the canal extends down further. All right, so if I ask you, where does the spinal cord end, and I will, you're going to say L1/L2, the bottom of L1, the top of L2. Right? It does not fill that spinal canal up. Okay? When you're like a fetus, an embryo, it does, but then you outgrow it, and the spinal cord stops growing, but you continue to, you continue to grow, so to speak. Okay? The other thing, if you looked at the spinal cord, it would be like a tube, like a cylinder. But watch this. Draw this down. The spinal cord has a couple features like this. Watch this. If I took the spinal cord and the cervical spine, it would look like a tube. And then in the cervical spine, I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit. There's going to be a swelling. And then it's going to become narrow again in the thoracic spine. And then right where it ends, it becomes swollen again like this. And I'm exaggerating a little bit. And then it ends as a point. So draw that for a second somewhere on the side of your paper. You have a paper, please? Yeah. Or take a picture of it after or something like that. Okay. So watch this, guys. This is the tip of the spinal cord. So what's the level there? A vertebrae level? L1, L2. So this is where we're at. We're at the L1, L2 level. So watch this. This swelling right here is called the cervical enlargement. Cervical enlargement. All right, so that's swelling right there. So here's what happens. The nerves that come out from that part of the spinal cord, they go down into our arms. So we're going to have more nerves coming out there, because again, we just studied all those muscles in your arms. There's a lot of nerves that come out there that go into our into the arms. So that's the cervical enlargement. It's bigger because of all the nerves coming out from that part of the spinal cord into our arms. Anybody have any questions with that? This swelling is called the lumbar enlargement. Where do you think the nerves are going to come out and go to from the lumbar enlargement? Where are they going to go? Exactly right. The pelvis, the buttock, and the legs, all these muscles that we just studied, they all need nerves, right? So watch this. The nerves will come down like this. They go through the spinal canal here. Remember, the spinal canal is empty. So all this are nerves that head down to the legs. Okay? I just realized one thing. Bear with me one second. While you draw that down. So I can just follow along up here. So this is the lumbar enlargement, and again, it's going to give rise to all these nerves that come down down to the legs. Now watch this, guys. This point right over here that ends the spinal cord, that has a name. This tip you're going to call the conus medullaris. Okay, so the tip of the spinal cord, that very point, and I'll show you on the model next week. Today I'm just going to want to go over it. Sorry. If I ask you what's the tapered end or the pointed end of the spinal cord, and I promise you I will ask you on the last exam, what's the tapered end, you're going to say conus medullaris. What does conus mean, you think? Like a cone, right? So it's got a point to it. That's where they come up with that term. Okay? Cervical enlargement, lumbar enlargement, conus medullaris. The conus medullaris is at what vertebral level? We got to say L1, L2, right? The bottom of L1, the top of L2. It's kind of in between. Okay? Now, there's one other structure. Coming down from the conus medullaris. Oh, wait, did I jump over something? Oh, no, I'm going to go back. So I did conus medullaris. Watch this, guys. So when the anatomists were doing dissection and they saw all these nerves coming down like this, they said, you know what, this kind of looks like the back of a horse. Can you use your imagination for a second? Kind of think of that being the horse's tail, right? So all those nerves that were going down into the pelvis and the legs, they decided to call the horse's tail. We call the horse's tail the cauda equina. Cauda means the back of. What is equine? Equestrian. Horse, right? You never heard that word. Equestrian is a horse. So cauda equina is like looking at the back of the horse. It looked like the horse's tail. And all it is those nerves that are coming down towards the the buttock area and the legs. Okay? Any questions on that? This last structure over here. Extending down from the conus medullaris, I'm going to draw it in pink. There's like a ligament, it's like a rope that goes down and it goes through the sacrum and it attaches to the coccyx. So this is my kind of representation of the coccyx, the little tailbone. This ligament is called the filum terminale. Filum terminale. It kind of holds the spinal cord down. It stabilizes the spinal cord. Right? It's like if you had a balloon and it had helium in it and the balloon was going to go up, so you take the rope and you hold the rope to keep the balloon from riding up. That's the filum terminale. It kind of holds the spinal cord in place. Okay? So if I ask you, what does the filum terminale do? You could just say it holds the spinal cord in place, stabilizes the spinal cord. However you want to word it, I'm okay with that. Okay? Any questions on what we've done so far, guys? The last two things. When we do look at the spinal cord, next week I'll show you these. The last two structures, watch this. There's something called an anterior median fissure. So what does anterior mean? Front. The front of the spinal cord. What's median? Center, midline, right? A fissure, when we looked at bones, was like a slit-like opening. A fissure in the nervous system is a deep groove. So on the front of the spinal cord, guys, there is a deep groove that runs right down the middle. We call it the anterior median fissure. I'll show you on a picture next week. We're going to draw a diagram next week. Anterior median fissure. All right, it's a deep groove on the front of the cord. What is posterior mean? Back. The back. So on the back of the spinal cord, in the midline also, there is something called the sulcus. A sulcus, if you just want to put down, is a shallow groove. So a fissure is a deep groove, a sulcus, shallow groove. Okay, so on the front of the spinal cord, there's a deep groove. On the back of the spinal cord, there's a shallow groove. Why is that important? When you see the spinal cord, I need you to know what is the front and what is the back. And that's what I always look at. I look for the deep groove, I know I have an anterior view. If I see the shallow groove, I know I have a posterior view. That becomes important next week. Okay? That'll be important next week. Otherwise, you're going to get a lot of stuff wrong on the final if you can't tell front from back. It's easy. Anybody, questions or comments? Okay. The last thing, and I'm going to let you go. If we were doing dissection, before we got to the spinal cord itself, you would see that the spinal cord has 3 protective coverings that we call meninges. Have you guys ever heard of somebody getting meningitis?
Yeah.
Probably, right? People die from meningitis, as a matter of fact. The meningitis is an inflammation or an infection of these 3 protective coverings. So I want to draw a picture real quick. Does anybody need this still up here, or you want to take a picture of it? Everybody's good? Everybody has it? Like I said, I will ask. So do this. Draw one more picture for me. Let me just see which one. This is going to be at the bottom of page 2. The dura mater, the arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. That's what we're looking at right now, guys. So draw this picture, guys. Take this right here is going to be our spinal cord on cross section. So we took the spinal cord, we chop it in half, and we're going to look into it. So that's what it kind of looks like that. There are 3 protective coverings. The first one is attached right to the spinal cord. If you were doing dissection, you took like tweezers, some forceps, and you pulled on this tissue, you wouldn't be able to pull it away from the spinal cord. It's actually attached to the spinal cord. It's called the pia mater. So I'm going to draw it as a kind of a thin line like this. It's right on the spinal cord. Right? You can draw it. It's a very thin tissue. In Latin, pia means delicate. Mater means mother, like a protector. Right? It's a protector. So they call it the delicate protector, the pia mater. Right? It's attached right to the spinal cord. So that's my one in pink. Pia mater. Now, the next one I'll do in blue. Does not touch the pia mater. It's actually a little bit away, causing like a space over here. So draw the next one like this. This is the second meninge. We're going to call this one the arachnoid mater. What's arachnoid mean?
Branch.
Not branching. Oh, okay, branching. I'll take like spider-like, like a spider's web, right? So when the anatomists looked at it, it looked like a spider's web to them. So they said arachnoid for spider. So it had like a web-like appearance, a fishnet appearance. Okay. Okay. You don't have to get that excited about it. It's just a spider. That's it. You okay?
It's only embarrassing.
She said at least.
Everybody's good?
Yep, I'm good.
All right, good. Watch this. The next one I'm going to draw a little bit thicker because it's a pretty tough membrane, but I want you to draw it right up against the arachnoid. Okay? So I'm going to draw it as a thick one like this. It's right up against the arachnoid like that. But if we wanted to, we could separate them. They're not like stuck together. Okay. This one is called the dura mater. In Latin, dura means tough. So this is the tough mother, the tough protector. Okay, the dura mater. If you were doing dissection, guys, and we took tweezers, some forceps, and you grabbed this tissue, it's like a tough connective tissue. You could tell it's strong. Okay, so dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater. The last thing before I let you go. It turns out there are spaces associated with these meninges. So watch this. This space right here between the pia and the dura, we're going to call, I'm going to write the spaces on this side. Those are the meninges. Over here, I'm going to write the spaces. This space right here, guys, is called the subarachnoid space. So the space between the arachnoid and the dura is the subarachnoid space. What does sub mean? Underneath, excellent, right? Like a submarine goes underneath the water. So underneath the arachnoid is the subarachnoid space. Here's the important thing, and I promise you I will ask you this. This space contains something called cerebrospinal fluid. You can abbreviate that, guys, CSF. So around our brain, around our spinal cord, we have fluid called the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay, so our brain and spinal cord are in water. It's kind of interesting. Now watch this. The dura and the arachnoid, normally there's no space there. Watch this for a second. Let's pretend this is the arachnoid and this hand is the dura. The two membranes sit up against one another, and the space kind of just looks like a line between my hands here. See that kind of the line? Normally, when we're healthy, that space is not there. But let's just say somebody falls off their chair, and this is actually perfect. I'm glad you did that. Had Amanda hit her head, you did, right?
Yes.
Okay. But let's say she hit her head, and now there's bleeding and inflammation in the brain. Blood will do this, guys. It goes between the dura and the arachnoid, and we start to see the space filled with blood and inflammation. Now, that could put pressure on the brain and be fatal. Do you guys remember this story? You know the actor Liam Neeson from Taken and all those movies that he does? His wife, right? A couple years back, they were on a family vacation, I think up in like Canada area. She was on not a big ski slope, a bunny hill. She fell, she hit her head. She didn't show any symptoms right away. She said, I'm okay, don't worry about it. It turns out she had a bleed, and it started filling up this space, and the pressure actually put damaged vital areas of her brain, and it was fatal. I think she was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s or something like that. What's her name? Natasha Richardson, I think, or something like that. And she died. This young woman. Had they realized it earlier, had they done a CAT scan earlier, they could have went in, they could have tapped the space, draw the blood out, and she would be here today. So this space is a potential space. It is not there as long as there's no trauma, right? We didn't hurt ourselves. So watch this. This space right here, guys, is a potential space. It should not be there. You're going to call this the subdural space. So again, what does sub mean? Below, right? Below the dura. So it's between the dura and the arachnoid. It should not be there, right? It's between the dura and the arachnoid. It's a potential space. It should not be there. It's only there. And then sometimes you may have heard this, but when people have bleeding there, they call it a subdural hematoma. It's just like a blood accumulation. Finally, outside the dura, right here, there's another big space. I'll show it to you next week. It's filled with fat. It's between the bone, like the lamina and the pedicles and the vertebrae of the body. There's another space. This space here is our last space of the day. It's called the epidural space. Have you ever heard that word? Epidural? Right? Epidural is where they give injections for when labor and delivery, surgical procedures, that type of thing. So I'll show you that space next week. But what does epi mean? Outside or upon. So this is outside of the dura. That's why they call it epidural. Right? When people go for a spinal tap, which space are they going to go in to draw out fluid? Subarachnoid space, right? They take this long needle, they go into the subarachnoid space, they draw out the fluid to see if there's any bleeding or infection and that type of stuff. All right, guys? Good job today, man. You guys did really well. Very pleased.